Welcome to the CSU Chancellor's Office webinar on best practices in the retention of diverse new in-service teachers. We have some interesting and relevant content to share with you today that I think you'll enjoy. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to thank the entities that have made this work possible, this important work that we're carrying out right now. It is because of the charitable contributions we received from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Fedco Foundation that we're able to engage in this important work. It's also due to the strong relationship, collaborative relationship that LA Unified and California State University Northridge, CSUN, had developed across the years that we're able to continue to do this work. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ernest Black from the Chancellor's Office to tell us what we're going to be discussing today. Ernest?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ernest Black. I am with the California State University Chancellor's Office located in lovely Long Beach. Before I begin with today's agenda, I do want to bring greetings from our Assistant Vice Chancellor of Educator and Leadership Programs, Shireen Paree, and our former Assistant Vice Chancellor, Marquita Greneau-Shire, both of whom are at the conference I am attending today. After I speak, and I just want to give a little bit of information about being a male teacher of color, we're going to hear from the Dean of California State University Northridge and our colleague at Northridge, who you met earlier, the co-director of the Compton Male Teacher of Color Network and the project manager of the Los Angeles Male Teachers of Color Network, John Reveles, and our colleague Marco Navarra as well, who I see just rejoined us on the screen. So I do want to start by saying that I taught in LA Unified for several years, right? And I enjoyed it, best job I ever had. The numbers of men of color, even back then, were small. We're not seeing an increase over this time. And I will tell you, I earned my credential in the late 1990s. So, and I was a commodity then. I feel like I'm still a commodity now. So we want to make sure that we begin increasing these numbers because of the impact that it has on the students in our classrooms. And to that end, when I was asked to join the advisory board of the Los Angeles Male Teachers of Color Network, I jumped at that opportunity. I jumped at that opportunity because I want to make sure that within our realms, within our grasp, within our purview, that we make sure that everybody has access to a male teacher of color, especially in the Los Angeles Basin area. So once again, thank you for attending this afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to ask, if we haven't already, if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we will be doing a question and answer period at the end of our webinar this afternoon. And I'm going to turn it over to Dean Tarver Baring.
Thank you, Dr. Black, and I honor you for being one of the male teachers of color that makes such a difference in the schools. So thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. As Dean of the Michael D. Eisner College of Education here at Cal State Northridge, it is my honor to welcome you to this presentation to briefly share some information with you about our college as it relates to the presentation. We have one of the largest teacher preparation programs in the California State University system, with over 1,200 teacher candidates enrolled in 27 credential tracks. And we value the diversity of our College of Education students and faculty and the schools and teachers that we serve in the community. Our faculty and students are strongly passionate about embracing social justice, equity, access, and inclusion in all of our work. And over the last 2 years, we've engaged in strategic planning at both college and university levels to move forward with transformative initiatives, including addressing structural changes that best support our teachers of color and address implicit biases and racism that needs to be changed within our educational system. Our commitment is reflected by our being recognized as a leader in the CSU with grants to recruit and retain diverse teachers in the teaching profession through numerous initiatives, such as the Future Minority Male Teachers of California Project, which ran from 2016 to 19, and the Compton Male Teachers of Color Network, which we are going to hear about a little bit later on. We are also partners in the CSU Center for Transformational Educator Preparation Programs, with a focus on recruiting, preparing, and retaining BIPOC teachers to serve California's diverse student population. Through our work with this center, we have achieved a significant increase in Latinx student teacher enrollment, expanding our enrollment from 36% in 2020 to 50% of our students in 2022, which is about where our student population on campus is. We also have been trying to expand our Black teacher enrollment, and it has gone up somewhat. We only have 5% Black students on campus, so the campus as a whole is also working on this. Our work is especially impactful as it in just one school district, Los Angeles Unified School District, which is our partner here today that we'll be talking about. Our graduates accounted for 590 new teachers and specialists hired just last year, 19% of all of their teachers, with the majority of these teachers working in underserved schools to promote success and mobility for all students. So you can see where we're really making a big dent in terms of diversifying the teacher workforce and especially trying to focus on the diversity of our teachers and recruiting in male teachers of color. I remain confident that we will continue our commitment to social justice and the recruitment and retention of teachers of color in the future, and will continue our engagement in meaningful contributions to the field of education that lead to change in our world for the better. And with that, I'd like to turn this back over to Dr. Reveles.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you. Before I get started with my talk, I'd like to introduce Dr. Marco A. Nava. He is a lead administrator in LAUSD, and it's because of his leadership and strong support of this project that it's been integral to our work. Dr. Nava?
Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us today to discuss this important topic. This topic is very near and dear to my heart, as like Dr. Black, I was a teacher in Los Angeles Unified, and I began my relationship with this district at the age of 4 when I enrolled in kindergarten. So LAUSD is definitely a part of my identity. And growing up, I really didn't consider becoming a teacher. And at State Dominguez Hills, there was an aid to teacher grant, and I was recruited as a bilingual teacher. And I fell in love with teaching. And I think because of being grown, homegrown within LAUSD and my great experience there, I stayed as a teacher. But I don't remember there being a specific strategy to retain male teachers of color to retain me. I just happened to really enjoy it and love the profession, and so I stayed. And so now teaching has really changed and evolved from when I began teaching in the early 90s. And so now we really need to adjust our strategy to attract, retain, and really help our male teachers of color stay with us and be successful. And so I'm really thankful for this partnership with Cal State Northridge, where we're able to really provide professional learning to our male teachers of color and to other support providers, which we're going to learn about in just a bit. So I'm really happy that you're joining us today, and hopefully we can share some strategies that might be useful to all of you. So thank you, John.
Thank you, Marco. So really what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the evolution of this work, starting with the Compton Male Teacher of Color Network. This was a grant that I co-led with Dr. Travis J. Bristol. Dr. Travis Bristol began his work on the East Coast along with other researchers at the time. However, it was Travis who identified the need to diversify the teacher workforce by recruiting, retaining, and supporting male teachers of color. In our work together, Travis and I focused on the retention piece. So in Compton Unified School District, we work with male teachers of color and their administrators, and we focus on the retention efforts. And we also developed a West Coast model for developing an affinity space. The affinity space we created during our PDs became a place where teachers and administrators could come together and support one another regarding their dilemmas of practice, personal and professional issues that affect them as men of color or as male teachers of color. And so what I'd like to do is present a 3-year timeline. As I said earlier at the beginning, it's due to the charitable contributions received from FEDCO and W.K. Kellogg Foundation that allow this work to take place. From 2018 to 2021, we received a 3-year proof of concept model grant. Well, it wasn't called that. It's just a 3-year grant in Compton, but we developed a proof of concept during that time. So in the first year, 2018 through 2019, we founded our network small. We started in Dominguez High School with 8 male teachers of color and 2 administrators, 2 of whom which I work with continually to this day in the LAMTCN work. At that time, we focused on male teacher of color retention, and then we also started defining mentoring and coaching and established definitions of those professional engagements. But we also utilized the Issaquah protocol to help teachers and administrators deal with dilemmas of practice in their school and in their classrooms. We ended that year with the May showcase at the board office, and it included male teachers of color from our network, as well as students of color, males of color in their classrooms who spoke directly of the influence that their male teachers of color had on their academic goals and trajectory. The second year, we extended the CMTCN by 75% and included elementary and middle schools. And then we implemented self-directed peer observations so that the males of color could help each other in a low stakes, less stressful way. And we continue to develop our work. However, we wanted to continue to expand that. And in March of 2020, California was the first state to issue a stay-at-home order due to the COVID-19 pandemic that affect us all in myriad ways. At that time, we had to decide what we were going to do with our network. But because of the strong connections and relationships that we have developed with the male teachers of color and administrators that we were working with in the network, we were able to take everything online seamlessly. And we conducted our PDs virtually via Zoom. And in 2020, we had our first May virtual summit, which was attended by local and national leaders. And in fact, Tony Thurman, the superintendent of public instruction in the state of California, was our keynote speaker that year. And then after that occurred, we wanted to scale up the model to throughout the entire school district of Compton. However, the COVID pandemic changed our plans because teachers were already overwhelmed and overworked, and their students were facing all kinds of horrible and sad issues related to the pandemic. Therefore, we continued doing the PDs with the teachers of colors and the mentor and the administrators that we had, and we did continue to implement the PDs. However, we weren't able to expand it across the district like we wanted to. And in 2021, we had our second annual May Virtual Summit, which was again hosted and attended by local and national leaders. And our keynote speaker that year was Assemblymember Mike Gibson, who authored AB 520 legislation, on diversifying the teacher workforce grant. With his authoring and the support of Tony Thurman, that work, diversifying the teacher workforce grant has been passed and exists today. And in fact, Tony Thurman and Mike Gibson pointed directly to the work we are doing in Compton to help make the case for this legislation. So next, we were funded in January 2022 by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to carry out the grant to scale up to the Los Angeles Unified School District. Well, we started this by really developing a conceptual and organizational framework to utilize in the district. By doing so, we focused on Bowman and Deal's framework, but we only focus on two aspects, two important aspects to us. And that was the human resource frame, which is the first one we developed. And the human resource frame really emphasizes human contact, personal growth, and job satisfaction. And it is through this work that we've been able to sort of shift the idea of the organization being there to serve the people, as opposed to just having the teachers or the people in the organization working to serve the organization. And we've continued to develop that. And we also utilize the symbolic frame that really addresses people's need for organizational and cultural climate that fosters a sense of purpose. As all of us in the education profession know, that we need to be reminded, and we also need to realize that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And that continues to keep that fire in our belly going of the work we're doing. And it really helps us to create systemic change. And lastly, we drew on the CDE report, the California Department of Education report, that really points directly to the mismatch or this incongruence between teachers of color and the student body that they teach in the state of California. And we utilize these frameworks to continue our work and develop our work. And in fact, the CDE report is one of the documents that we've uploaded to MERLOT that we'll be sharing with you. This slide, I would like to ask Marco to present, because this slide has to do with the work we've been doing in LAUSD, and he has special insight into the people who have been influenced in the district by it. Marco?
Yes, thank you, John. So the approach that we took when we began the Los Angeles Male Teacher of Color Network was we took the learning that John and his team had from the Compton Male Teacher of Color Network, and we tried to figure out how we were going to scale this up. And of course, to do that in Los Angeles, it takes a very large, talented team. So I do want to thank Dr. Patricia Pernin, who I see in the audience. She and her team have been amazing in terms of supporting this effort, and our mentors, specifically the male teachers of color that are in our programs. And Patricia, Dr. Pernin, oversees our district intern programs, our ICAP programs. And she basically included this professional development as part of the learning for our mentors. So we're looking at male teachers of color, and then the first layer of support are the mentors who are working with our new teachers in getting their teaching credential. And then we layered principals on top of that, because we know that many initiatives will not survive if the principal is not supporting it at a school-wide level. And whether, we specifically invited principals who had male teachers of color and mentors at their schools, but then we decided to open it up to all principals in Los Angeles Unified, because they may find themselves at a school with many male teachers of color next year or in another year after that. And then we also figured that the strategies they learn will be helpful for any teachers at their school site. And we've actually had a very positive response. We had over 50 principals last month on a Saturday give up 3 hours of their day to come to our session and learn some of these strategies. And then on top of that piece, I oversee a team of coaches that provide coaching during the administrative services credential. And they support some of the principals that are coming to these professional developments. And so they're participating in the professional development that's offered through John and his team at CSUN. And they use what they learn in those coaching conversations with our principals and assistant principals. And so we took this multi-level approach to really scale the work up so that there are many levels of support for our male teachers of color, principals, the coaches that support those principals, and then their mentors that they work with on a regular basis. And so we're hoping to have some very good data to share out at the end of this year. Back to you, John.
Indeed. Thank you, Marco. I appreciate that. Very interesting content that we're going through as we continue to develop this model and evolve it. So as I said before, we developed that a symbolic frame, and we're still constantly evolving and developing approaches, as Marco said, to work with administrators, teacher mentors, and administrative coaches to help them develop these shared networks where they can build this strong interest and engagement in common activities. And in this case, it's all around teaching and education and how we support each other, but how we support our students in the classroom and how the work that we do is meaningful to them. And again, as Marco said, none of this work would be done in a vacuum. We are all working on an excellent team. We have Patricia Pernin, Mark Duncan, Marco Nava, Al Ristori, Blaine Watson, Ian Eddy. We're all part of this great team, and Wendy and all the other support staff. There's so many people that are a part of this. And that's part of the beauty of the work, is we're really gaining momentum with the work. In any case, the affinity space that we're co-creating in LAMTCN is a place where we can all learn to develop new ways of communicating, where administrators and teachers can influence each other in reciprocal ways as opposed to hierarchical ones. And oftentimes that is the difference that makes a difference. When you're influencing each other in reciprocal ways, it means that you're being heard, that you're there, your presence, your job, and everything is meaningful. It's not just about putting out fires or telling you how to solve problems. It's about helping teachers solve their own problems, because teachers are smart and they can do this, and supporting male teachers of color because they're leaving the field in high numbers, and we're working to change that now in LAUSD. The affinity space therefore becomes a place. So as I said, with Compton, we started it physically. We were there. We would be there at Dominguez High School with Blaine and Ian and all the teachers, and we'd be there on Saturdays for like 7 or 8 hours a day sometimes. But then when the pandemic hit, we had to move virtually, and we were really, it was quite a dilemma, but it worked. It worked because the support was there and the human element was still a piece of it. And you could still do this in your own school districts and in your own school sites virtually. And you can also meet virtually and physically found. You can go back and forth. In any case, I wanted to talk a little bit about project evaluation. As Marco mentioned, we're hoping to get some interesting data. Because we were funded in January 2022 and we started work in spring, we weren't able to onboard an evaluator until May. But we onboarded a nationally recognized evaluator at our university, Dr. Pete Goldschmidt. He's known throughout the state and in states like New Mexico and other states where he's done excellent work. He's a very intelligent statistician, and I worked along with him across this past summer at 2022 and Al Ristori, my other colleague, to develop a pre and post evaluation instrument for the LAMTCN participants. And I'll be happy to tell you that because of Marco, Pat, and Mark Duncan, we were able to implement that pre-survey with teacher mentors, school administrators, and the teacher mentees that the teacher mentors mentor. And I'll have you know that each teacher mentor mentors 10 new teachers in the district. So we see a tremendous ripple effect. And as Marco said, by involving administrators and teacher mentors and coaches, we are really starting to really coalesce around this idea that we can support our new teachers and we can retain them, because we know that if you don't retain good teachers, it breaks the bank to hire and rehire and train and retrain. And then regarding project dissemination, we disseminate our work in the LAMTCN via the PD in the district. And we're also expanding our project dissemination in 2 ways. Today's virtual seminar that's being broadcast throughout the state, across the CSUs and other entities and other people that wish to learn more about it. We're also sharing PD content that's uploaded to MERLOT. And we're also, myself and Marco and other team leaders are going to be presenting at the 2022 Association of California School Administrators Leadership Conference. At that time, we will share some of the tools, as we're doing now, with other administrators and other folks who really want to learn how to implement this in their own districts, along with partner universities and other entities as well, funding entities that may help them do so. So we'd like to also give you a chance to ask us questions, and we'd like to take some time, myself, Marco, and Ernest will be fielding the questions, if I remember correctly, right, Ernest? And you'll field them to each one of us as there's been several questions that appeared. But I just wanted to also let you know that along with the questions, we uploaded content. We uploaded Affinity Group's article, the department CDE report that I mentioned, and then we also uploaded plans, and I will be uploading this slide deck to share online, and it has a direct link to MERLOT. Yes, Ernest?
So the first question I have is, how can we recruit more male teachers of color into our credential programs?
Yes, sorry about that. I accidentally took that. Well, that question I think is Sherry would be well suited to answer that. Sherry, would you like to take that? Let me go back to the question and answer. Sorry about that.
Sure. I think that our work through the Center for Transformational Educator Preparation Programs, known as CTEP, has been very influential and effective in recruiting BIPOC teachers, in particular Latinx and Black teachers of color. And in this group, of course, males are always in the smaller number, but we have taken a few steps in our recruitment process that I think really is leading to good results. It begins with, I think, what we've heard already from both John and Marco about relationship and mentoring, and really reaching out to the communities that we want to bring into the teaching profession that reflect the diversity that we want to see out there. So we've been out in community colleges, out in K-12 schools. We've had a bunch of schools coming onto campus. One of our first initiatives with Kellogg was bringing young men of color from the area high schools onto campus for a summer event, and John might be able to talk more about that, to have them consider becoming teachers of color. But we've also really worked on campus with Africana studies, other ethnic studies, as well as across our campus, which is an HSU campus, to impress the importance of teachers coming in who can represent the communities we serve, and the ability for them to really change the lives of these students. So when we have information sessions, after we encourage people to come to these, we especially follow up with personal phone calls to anyone who doesn't complete their application. And we don't just target one group, but we're paying attention to the diversity in those information sessions, which the students do share voluntarily, and also the male, female, or transgender. We have lots of different ways of people identifying themselves now, and if they would so share, we pay attention to that as well, and want to really diversify that area also. We just did a survey that came back that showed out of about 120 teacher candidates who applied to our program, that personal contact, that phone call, that reaching out, and that contact that they also seem to be getting with our credential office and with our faculty really made a difference in these folks wanting to come in and be in our program. So just like the affinity groups serve a purpose, they're all along the pipeline. We have to model and impress upon the communities we most want to bring in why this is so imperative that we bring in more male teachers of color and teachers of color, and that we build relationship with them, model and provide mentorship for this process, all the way through into the teachers who actually then enter the field. And as John and Marco have been working on, provide that same relationship, belongingness, and support to retain these teachers so that we can keep those numbers growing and really making a difference in the world. So those are some of the things we're doing.
Thank you, Sherry. And I wanted to add to that, because you're right. I did have some other insight that I'd like to share. I really appreciate what you said. Here at CSUN, we're making lots of efforts to recruit and retain teachers through the grant work, but also through other efforts. We're recruiting diversified educational workforce. So for instance, with the FEDCO grant, we're bringing busloads. They provided money. We're bringing busloads of high school students. And as Sherry mentioned, we're starting at the beginning point. So we're bringing students onto campus, doing bus tours, and really showing them the value of becoming a teacher and how they could come in to CSUN or other CSUs and what sort of majors they need to take and some of the obstacles that exist for students in college and that they may not otherwise known were there, so they can avoid some of those pitfalls and continue along their trajectory. And then someone, Ernest, you had a question. Someone asked what CTEP is. Sherry, can you?
Well, I put it in the chat.
Thank
CTEP
you.
stands for Center for Transformative Educator Preparation Programs. So that
I
is,
just want to take a second, if I can, to add on in terms of recruiting some teachers, because this is what we've kind of seen lately, where we've had some success, but it really speaks to what Dean Tarver-Baring shared earlier in terms of relationships. For our principals, those are our primary human capital managers. And when they see a substitute teacher who is phenomenal or has a lot of potential, and it's a male teacher of color, they invite them to apply to become teachers. And when we get that recommendation, you know, that personal invitation, as the dean was sharing, right, relationships, they're more likely to accept that invitation. And when they're referred to human resources for teacher onboarding, we try to really fast track that application because we don't want to lose them, especially when they're, you know, highly talented. And so that's been something that's actually been working nicely for us. It's not solving, right, the whole situation, but we are seeing an influx of male teachers of color coming through our substitute teacher ranks. And it's really our principals at the school sites who are saying, hey, we have some phenomenal substitute teachers, let's not lose them. And they're kind of that first line of that relationship building and saying, join us, join our ranks, join our faculty. And so then we try to be responsive to that. So that might be one way, is really supporting principals in that messaging to work for your school districts and the need that we have to really have our teacher workforce represent our student population and our school communities that they're working, that they're serving in. So thankfully, you know, it's been helping us out. So we're going to really try to capitalize on that going forward.
I have another question from the Q&A, and there are a couple in the chat as well, but this one is, are additional incentives being offered to the males of color for becoming a teacher?
Sherry?
Well, I can answer about incentives that are offered to teachers in our residency programs, which are 70% diverse teachers. And we do have a significant number of male teachers in those residency programs. For those of you who don't know what that is, I'm assuming most people here do, that's a one-year program where all of the courses and the field work happen in a single year, and the credential comes at the end, so that someone can come in, get their credential, and get out in the field to meet the teacher shortages quickly. And residency programs are supported by funding from the state that comes through, in this case, Los Angeles Unified to Northridge, where we can pay, at this point going forward, somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to a teacher to come into this program, because the downside is they can't work if they're going to school and out in the field a lot. But it also, you know, I think really incentivizes their teachers coming into this program. So are we targeting specifically male teachers of color and just only giving them scholarships? That gets a little bit complicated. What we're doing is encouraging those male teachers of color to come into these programs where those scholarships exist. We also have many scholarships in our college, which we let people know once they're in the program that are available, something like 45 to 50 scholarships in different areas. And we work in terms of STEM with Misty, which covers entrance fees, which is one obstacle that are keeping lots of teachers out, including male teachers of color. So through our Misty funding, which is also coming through the chancellor's office, if people come in and do training to pass the entrance exams, once they've taken these exams, they're reimbursed for the costs through the Misty funds. In addition, they're given workshops to help them pass those exams. And there's lots of mentoring on campus, both by our math and science and our College of Ed faculty in math, to bring diverse students into our elementary and secondary departments through the MISTI programs. So again, we're seeing wonderful increases in diversity in those programs right now. And I'd love to see more men than are in there now, but it is growing, and the diversity is growing too. So,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of that support is there.
Thank you,
John, I
Sherry.
think you also have some funding that you're supporting in
Yeah,
some.
indeed, we're developing the affinity groups in the college through the CTEP. We're helping to develop affinity groups for diverse teachers. So it's generally, and we're also going to be developing these affinity spaces in LAUSD. We're currently going to target specifically new male teachers of color, and working along with Pat and Mark Duncan and Marco Nava and Al Ristori and Ian Eddy and Blaine Watson. We're going to be focusing our efforts to help retain some of them that are already new male teachers who are in LAUSD. So that's some of the stuff we're doing. There's so many sources and so many ways to incentivize people. And I know some of it may come from monetary incentives, but I think the more importantly, it comes from doing the work that we're doing in creating the spaces where people feel as if they are a part of something bigger than themselves, that they're impacting the next generation of citizenry through their teaching and being able to be supported by other folks. Because oftentimes I can say, when I was as a male of color, as a male teacher of color, still at the university level, there are often times where I feel isolated, and times in my past where I felt like I was working in a silo. But when you can create these networks, you begin to incentivize each other in social emotional ways that really doesn't have a price tag. However, when you add those resources that Sherry has pointed to, resources that are in the district that Marco was talking about, then you just sort of up the ante and you create this space where people really want to come into the profession of education and they want to impact the next generation. Ernest, I think you had another question.
I have another question, and this one is probably for our colleagues at CSUN. Can high schools that are not a part of LAUSD participate in the campus, in the visits to the CSUN campus?
No, absolutely. Yes, we have a wonderful graduate recruitment specialist that's been working with John, Jacqueline Keatsman, and she would be thrilled to have any high school from anywhere come to our campus as a part of introducing them to the idea of becoming teachers at CSUN. So we're especially in partnership with LAUSD because that's the big group that we work with. But we actually are in, I think, 24 school districts working with our student teachers, and then where they end up working. So Marco, you're not the only game in town. I hate to tell you that. You're the biggest game in town, but you're not the only. So we would be happy if someone would like to shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat here. I can connect you up with our recruitment specialist, and she could make arrangements for other high schools to come and visit.
Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, that's Jacqueline Keatsman. She's wonderful. She's a recruitment specialist throughout the college.
So I have another question for you. What successes did you have with the Compton Male Teachers of Color Network that helped you prepare or lay the foundation for the Los Angeles Male Teachers of Color Network?
That's a great question, and I assume it's directed towards me, right? So with the Compton Male Teacher of Color Network, there were a lot of things that occurred, and there were a lot of success and a lot of challenges. So I'll start off by talking about the success that Travis J. Bristol had experienced on the East Coast through New York City Teach and the Boston Teacher Residency Program. He brought a lot of his work and his approach to developing this network to the West Coast when he moved here. When we started collaborating in Compton, we put our brains together, but it wasn't just him and I, it was all of us. We all worked on this in collaboration. And so that I would point to that as the biggest success, is being inclusive and really using this reciprocal way of collaborating. where everybody's an important part, a member of the team. And so we did that and we learned. And as I said, we did have challenges, the biggest one being the pandemic. It affected all of us globally. And it really affected Compton because it's in that district, they have an increasingly diverse population of students and their community. And they have not only African-American population and Asian populations, they have a large increasing number of Latino populations or Latinx. And so we had to be reticent, we had to be not reticent, we had to be mindful of the different demographics in the district as we were working together, because issues would happen. For instance, there are issues happen in real time that we would address during the PD in our affinity spaces. And we learned those lessons and we developed a proof of concept model that allowed us to carry that on into LAUSD. So I would say, yes, there's specific developing a model, using tools like the Issaquah protocol, developing approach to supporting male teachers of color specifically to help diversify the teacher workforce. Because right there, you get a twofer. You're getting a male teacher and you're also getting a diverse person because they're male teachers of color. So you're actually increasing the diversity pipeline in education as well. And also really focusing on their practice. And so those things, by learning to listen to what they have to say about their own practice and what they need. So in fact, with the PD that we're doing now, Marco can also speak to this. We're evolving it because we're listening to the feedback we get. We're working, we're including administrators, and we're also doing some systematic analysis. We're looking at the strategic plan. We're looking at ways that we can learn. So it's a continual evolution and a continual learning process. And yes, it's hard to scale up from Compton to the second largest school district in the US, but it's not impossible. We're seeing that right now. And it's because of those lessons that we learned, specific lessons of the tools we use, the people that we listen to, and how we worked collaboratively across that grant.
I have another question for you, and John, this is probably for you also. Will the Los Angeles Male Teachers of Color Network be expanded to expanding the program to work with women of color?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So while it is called the Los Angeles Male Teacher of Color Network, when we do our PDs, we provide PD to teacher mentors. And oftentimes teacher mentors and school administrators and coaches are females and females of color, or females from status quo backgrounds, and males from status quo backgrounds like white European male, white European female, and so forth. So everybody is getting the training and they're impacting the mentees that they affect. As I said, each mentor mentors 10 new teachers in the district, and the administrators are running their school sites where they may or may not have a large pool of male teachers of color. We're focusing our efforts to support the retention of male teachers of color. Yes, indeed, that's true. But the training that we're doing is beneficial to all teachers, regardless of their ethnic or racial background, in my opinion. Marco, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, thank you, John. We would love to, focus on recruitment on females of color. So I'm excited to potentially work with CSUN to acquire more funding. But I will say that even within Los Angeles Unified, as we try to diversify our teacher workforce, we're also looking at our leader workforce. And we've been intentional about trying to find that balance where we're not pulling teachers from classrooms because we know there's a shortage. But for those that are interested in pursuing a position in administration, a school site leader, we're very intentional about recruiting females of color and males of color. We're seeing a similar pattern. Like, we're very successful in having more females of color in our aspiring administrator programs. We're not seeing the same numbers for males of color into the program. So again, we're going back, looking at our data, and then we're now planning to work closely with our local district superintendents and say, we know there's talent there, so who might be ready to come and be an administrator in the near future? let's prepare them. Let's have them apply to our aspiring programs. Let's, you know, and then when they're finished, they're on the eligibility list. And so then we're diversifying it in that sense. So we're very intentional about trying to get representation that's, you know, somewhat proportional to our communities. And I think we've had some successes in some areas, and in others, there's still a long way to go.
Indeed, there is much work to do, but we're really, like as Sherry said, we're really making some inroads. We're really changing things, and just like when any systemic change that we make, it starts on a small scale, and it's getting a snowball effect right now, and things are beginning to build momentum. So, and that's part of why we're here today and sharing the work we're doing, is because we know that a lot of people are interested in this, doing this type of work. In fact, other districts like we've had Torrance Unified School District reach out to us, and they're going to be implementing affinity spaces there. They're focusing on recruiting more people of color into their district, other districts around. So I'll stop there. Yes, Ernest.
Oh, I have one last question so far. Marco, given your background in LA Unified, what steps does the district need to take to begin to retain more teachers of color?
Yes, I know that earlier we talked about some of the monetary incentives that are available to our teachers. But I'm recommending, you know, working with our director, Dr. Pernin, Dr. Giancarlo Mercado, who does our TGI, Teacher Growth and Induction Program, and then working with our Chief Human Resources Officer, Ms. Ileana Davalos. We have conducted some exit surveys from some of our teachers who leave, and we specifically ask them, so why did you leave? And again, these are not specifically people who are retiring. We know the reason there, but people who leave our district. And even though compensation is definitely one of the areas, the other is this perceived lack of respect for the profession. And sometimes that lack of respect, they're saying it's from our school leadership. And so we're working closely with our school site leaders. Again, that's why we're including them in this professional development, so that they're aware of what some of our teachers are saying when they leave. And so we want to address that. The other feature that we're being mindful about, Dr. Jacqueline Ollison from the California Department of Education has done some research on compassion fatigue. And she's specifically looking at new teachers and teachers of color and how they really care for their students. But when they become very good at either doing positive behavior supports or working with certain groups of students, they tend to have more students routed their way. And that becomes that invisible tax on teachers where they're working extra time. So for example, some male teachers might see more students, male students sent to them because they'll be told, oh, they could really benefit from a male, like a father figure of sorts or a male role model. And so while they are happy to support all of our students, if they don't receive additional supports over time, then they can succumb to compassion fatigue or that invisible tax. And so some of the things that we're talking about is how do we support them so there isn't that fatigue? And one way is reducing class sizes. Another way is additional paraprofessional support so that they're able to do smaller groups and then spend more time with different students. So there's a few strategies that we're employing to try to really support our male teachers of color so that they don't feel that burnout. And then there's also the opportunities for them to become teacher leaders at their school sites or throughout the district. So if they're very good in certain areas, then we might be able to cultivate that talent so that they serve as a lead teacher for other teachers. They can lead professional development at their school or at other school sites, and not necessarily gearing them toward administration, but just to develop that teacher leadership capacity within the school sites. And that's also another theme that came up from those exit interviews where teachers said, we have a lot of skills and we're not asked to use them at the school site. And I present at conferences in other states or even internationally. And yet at my own school site, I'm not asked to lead a professional development or lead a project. And so we've now written into our school leadership framework, which are professional learning standards for our school leaders, to create those teacher leadership opportunities at their school sites. And so we're seeing some gradual changes over time.
If that was the last, no, I have one more.
Another question?
What can you, and this is for everyone on the panel, what can you or your group do to help, let me shorten, get rid of the teacher shortage?
You want to go first, Sherry, and then Marco, and then I'll chime in?
Well, I think many of our CSU campuses saw a great increase in our teacher enrollment as the pandemic hit. That's kind of the silver lining. And part of that was because of deferment of entrance exams. And now I just was at the same conference that Marco and Ernest are at now. I drove back home to be on this webinar because I felt like I might have a quieter time than at the conference here. Anyway, I think that we do have opportunities. Trying to think of what I was just going to say as I got off track on that conference conversation. Tell me the question again. I lost my train of
How
thought.
can we offset the teacher shortage?
Okay.
What can you, yeah, there you go.
So the CTEP initiative has been incredible for us because we've really looked deeply into what we can do to change the way that we are recruiting and admitting teachers and getting rid of barriers. There was the deferment that I mentioned, but you know that CTC was at this conference. That's what I was trying to get to, and discussing with all of us also their thoughts about some of the barriers that might need to change in order for teachers coming into teacher ed that currently exist. So that's one way to increase teachers coming in. I think another way, honestly, is to impress upon the young people who might become teachers the opportunity to change the world, because young people right now are disillusioned. They look at the world around them and they see racism and they see social injustices and they are discouraged. And yet what we found is that many of the teachers who are in our programs say there was that one teacher who made a difference in my life, who took the time to tell me that I could do it when no one else would, or I had obstacles. And I want to be that person now for others. And so as we tap into the ability of these young people to really change the world, and we give them the tools through our education to do that, I really think that is bringing more teachers into our teacher education programs. So social justice messaging has been really critical, I think, not only in our campus, but in many of the campuses in our CSU that are colleges of ed. I know others are having equal success in this way. And honestly, the other problem in teacher education is they're not getting paid enough. So that's something where we really need to work at a legislative level, lobbying for more pay for teachers and more respect for teachers and what they do. Because there seems to be also a level of, I don't know, lack of appreciation for the educational process and for the incredible work that teachers do in our world. So I think anything we can do to improve those areas also will lead to more people coming into teacher education. So there's a lot of different ways to come at this one. I kind of got overwhelmed there for a minute, but it's all coming back to me.
Yeah, no problem, Sherry. Thank you. Marco, you want to add, or would you like me to go ahead?
Yes, I'll just quickly add that I think there are opportunities for recruiting some of our young people, as Dean Tarverberry was sharing. And I think like for me, I really never imagined teaching until I was recruited as a paraprofessional. And I think if we start looking at some of our students in high school, there are some who are already thinking about teaching. I think those of us who have taught can think of a student who like took over our class, so to speak, and taught a lesson and just showed that natural leadership. So I think if we begin to work closely with our community colleges and really have our students enrolling like in dual enrollment opportunities, that's going to save some money in the long term. And then transferring over to some of our Cal States and UCs and other university partners, and really looking at teaching as that profession. And then as districts, potentially we might be able to hire some of these students that are in these dually enrolled courses or later in these teacher preparation courses and have them working as paraprofessionals at our school sites and really providing that professional growth for them that's going to be helpful when they step into that classroom. My first day of teaching, I remember receiving my classroom key and a blessing from the principal, and it was like, good luck. And thankfully, I had been a paraprofessional for about 3 years, and I drew upon that experience to really help me not just survive, but really be successful in that first year. So I think if we're really strategic and intentional to start recruiting from that high school level and then having these multiple pathways for our young people to come into teaching, I think we might be able to recruit more teachers into our schools.
Thank you, Marco. And I'll just add just a couple comments and based on what you and Sherry said, because you are both much wiser than I am and you have much better approaches than I would. I would say just the work that we're doing as teachers that we're doing now to continue to replicate that and to put the good word out about teaching to help elevate the field, to advocate for higher teacher wages. It seems to me, I know, because I still teach classes and I still teach at the university. I have teacher in the teacher prep program, the master's and doctoral programs. And it seems to me, teachers in education oftentimes feel undervalued and underappreciated. And so that's where our work is so important, the work that Marco and Sherry are supporting and doing, the work that Ernest is doing at the Chancellor's office, and the work that we're doing in these kinds of projects. And that's part of why we want to share this, because we know that we're not alone in this. We're not in a vacuum. We know that there's lots of you out there right now, a lot of you that are doing the work on the ground. You're on the ground level and you're doing the work and you want more support. And I think by supporting each other and elevating the field, then I'm hopeful that things are going to change. The pandemic was hard on everybody. It really was. And I would argue that it was especially difficult on teachers. I talked to them. They were teachers, mentors, psychologists, mothers, fathers. They were taking all these roles that they, had no choice but to take on. So now we're doing something to sort of even out the scale. That's what I would say. Continue to elevate the field in the ways that we talk.
And that is all the questions that we have for this afternoon.
Great timing, right?
Great timing.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to thank you all for being here today and for taking time to share with us. And I just wanted to share one quote that I found that I believe resonates with some of the work we're doing and the talk that we had today. It's our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. This was by Mahatma Gandhi many, many years ago. We may not reach that goal, but we can continue to aspire towards that goal. And in that way, get closer to the goal, in my mind. Thank you all for being here.